I never planned to outlast her schemes. I just planned better. That's the thing about being underestimated your entire life. You learn to use it. You learn to let people read you as small while you're actually reading them. You learn that the quietest rooms hold the most dangerous truths. And you learn, above everything else, that patience is not weakness. Patience is the longest game there is. My name is Dorothy Hargrove. Most people call me Dot. I'm 68 years old. I live alone now, and for the past 2 years, my only daughter has been treating me like furniture she's waiting to throw out. This is the story of what I did about it. The coffee was ready at 5:13, same as every morning. I stood at the kitchen window in my robe and watched the light come up slow over the garden. Gerald's garden, technically, though I'd kept every plant alive through 2 winters without him now. The dahlias he planted along the back fence were already coming up stubborn and bright, the same way he always came up after every hard thing. I talked to them sometimes. I'm not ashamed of that. The house at 814 Aldermore Lane had been ours since 1991. We'd bought it on one salary and a prayer, back when Savannah was still in diapers and we were eating pasta 4 nights a week to make the mortgage. Gerald had walked through it twice before he made the offer. The second time, he stood in the doorway of what would become our bedroom, looked at the oak floors, and said, "Dot, I think this is where we become who we're supposed to be." He was right. We became everything in that house. We raised a daughter there. We argued and forgave and argued again. We refinished those floors ourselves on a long weekend in 2003, both of us on our knees, Gerald sweating through his undershirt, me with a bandana in my hair, laughing until our sides hurt over something I can't even remember now. We rewired the garage, repainted every room at least twice, replaced the roof the year Savannah graduated high school, put in the back porch the summer she left for college, because Gerald said we needed somewhere to sit and be quiet now that the noise had gone. Every corner of that house had a name behind it. Every dent in the baseboards had a story. Savannah saw square footage. Gerald died 26 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the morning I sat beside his hospital bed holding his hand when it went still. I had known it was coming. Knowing doesn't help the way people say it does. You think the preparation is shelter. It isn't. It's just a longer hallway to the same door. I came home from the hospital to an empty house and sat in Gerald's chair in the living room for 4 hours without moving. Then I got up, washed my face, and made a list of everything that needed to be done. 24 years managing federal department budgets will do that to a person. Crisis does not excuse you from logistics. The world keeps its ledgers whether you're grieving or not. Savannah arrived the afternoon of the funeral. She hugged me at the door, quickly, the way you hug an acquaintance, and then walked through the living room looking at everything with that particular expression I was only beginning to learn to read. She stood in the center of the room, turned a slow circle, and said, "Dad would have wanted the place modernized." She wasn't looking at his photographs when she said it. She was looking at the floor plan. I remember thinking, note that, and I did. Grief, I've come to understand, is something people around you grow impatient with long before you're done with it. There's an invisible clock others set that you never agreed to, and when you run past their deadline, they start calling it something else. Dramatic. Stuck. A lot. I gave Savannah the benefit of the doubt for the first several months. She was grieving too, I told myself. Loss makes people sharp and careless. It strips the polish off, and sometimes what's underneath isn't pretty. I had grace for that. I was her mother. Grace was part of the job. But grief doesn't roll its eyes. Grief doesn't mutter, "God, you're so dramatic," when you mention the cost of a funeral you paid for alone. Grief doesn't call you a freeloader in your own kitchen. Grief doesn't look at your home, your actual home, the one you've kept for 32 years, and say with genuine lightness, "I mean, let's be honest. This house will finally have some style when I move in." Savannah said that in November, about 6 months after the funeral. She was standing in the pantry I had stocked for decades, picking through the shelf like she was already cataloging what to keep. She said it like a joke, but she was looking at the crown molding when she said it. And Savannah didn't make jokes about things she wasn't already planning. I started keeping records in January. Not a diary. I want to be clear about that. Diaries are for feelings. What I kept was documentation. A dark blue binder in the cabinet of my sewing room, labeled on the spine in black marker. Receipts. Gerald always said I was the only person he'd ever met who filed things better than the federal government. I took that as a compliment. I still do. Here is what went into that binder over the following year and a half. March. Savannah borrowed my Range Rover without asking, left a note on the counter. Taking the car. Be a sport. When I brought it up calmly that evening, she blinked at me with those long lashes and said, "Mom, you weren't using it. Don't be weird." I wrote the date, the quote, the context. I printed the note. May. I found a box of family photographs in a Goodwill donation bag by the front door. Photos from Gerald's hallway wall, including our wedding portrait, Savannah's first birthday, a picture of Gerald holding newborn Savannah in the hospital, still in his work clothes because he'd driven straight from the job site. When I confronted her, Savannah shrugged and said, "Mom, they clash with the aesthetic. We're trying to modernize." Then she added, "Maybe it's time to let go of all that. All that. That was my marriage. That was my life." I rescued the photographs. I added the conversation to the binder. July. Savannah mentioned offhandedly that she'd put a small charge on my credit card, a venue deposit for a venue tasting. "Oops, meant to use mine. I'll Venmo you." She never did. I wrote it down. September. I offered her my grandmother's silver bracelet. Delicate, antique, passed through 4 generations of women in my family. I wore it on my own wedding day. I put it in a small velvet box and brought it to her apartment. She didn't open the box. "Mom, some people need to know when their taste expired." Then, louder, walking away, "No offense." I drove home with the bracelet still in my purse. That night, I heard her on the phone with her friend Kelsey. She always talked too loud on the phone, always had. And I caught one sentence through the kitchen wall. "She's just background noise. She'll be gone soon anyway." I sat down at the kitchen table. I did not cry. I opened the binder, wrote the date and time in exact words, and then I sat for a while in the quiet of the house Gerald and I had built, and I thought, she is counting the days until I am gone. And I thought, then I had better start counting differently. From that night forward, I stopped making excuses for her. I stopped waiting for the apology that was never going to arrive. I stopped performing the role of the patient, fading, grateful to be tolerated mother. And I started, very quietly, very deliberately, building a case. Because when you've spent 24 years tracking federal budget discrepancies, when you've sat across tables from senators who lied with perfect confidence about where the money went, when you have learned to find the decimal point someone tried to hide, you know that documentation is not pettiness. Documentation is power. And I had been handing mine away for free. Not anymore. The invitation to Savannah and Brett's engagement party came by text. Not even a proper text. A forwarded Evite, the kind with the animated champagne bubbles. I RSVP'd yes and bought a small gift, a silver frame, vintage, with a photo of Savannah at 3 years old sitting on Gerald's shoulders at the state fair. Both of them squinting in the sun and laughing. I thought she'd want it. I thought wrong. The party was held at the Ivory Room, a restaurant downtown with good lighting and overpriced appetizers. I arrived on time, which apparently put me in the minority. I found a spot near the windows, accepted a glass of sparkling water, and watched the room fill up around me. Brett's colleagues, Savannah's friends from her marketing firm, the bridesmaids in their coordinated outfits, already moving through the space like they owned it. Savannah arrived 40 minutes late in a white wrap dress, hair loose, glowing the way only people who have never carried real weight can glow. She kissed cheeks and laughed, and worked the room with the ease of someone who had always assumed rooms were made for her. She got to me last. She looked at the framed photo I'd set on the gift table, and something crossed her face. Not recognition, not warmth, something more like mild inconvenience. Then she took my arm and steered me toward the corner near the buffet, away from the other guests, close enough to the window that the sound of the street covered her voice. And she said it, quietly, precisely, the way she'd learned to say hard things without raising her voice, a skill, I'd come to understand, she'd been refining for years. Look, I need to say this clearly, because I'd rather do it here than have it be a whole thing later. You're not invited to the wedding. I need you to understand that. I looked at her. You're toxic, Mom. You make everything about you, and I'm not doing that on my wedding day. So just get over yourself, okay? Behind her, Kelsey and another bridesmaid were watching with small smiles. Someone's champagne glass clinked. Savannah squeezed my arm once, almost like affection, and then turned back to the party, her face resuming its perfect brightness before she'd taken 2 steps. I stood there for a moment. I breathed. I set my sparkling water down on the nearest surface, picked up my bag, found the gift table, left the frame, and walked out of the ivory room with my back straight and my face composed. In the car, I sat for 3 minutes without starting the engine. Then I called Mr. Aldridge. He answered on the first ring, the way he always did. "We're moving forward," I said. "All of it." "Understood," he said. "I'll have the listing paperwork ready tomorrow." Here is what Savannah did not know, standing in that restaurant telling me I was background noise. 3 days earlier, I had already signed the agreement to sell 814 Aldermore Lane. She thought she'd won something in that corner by the buffet. She thought she'd finally put me in my place, the quiet, shrinking, fading place she'd been building for me across 2 years of small cruelties and sideways comments. What she'd actually done was give me the last thing I needed, a clean conscience. I didn't sleep much that night, not from grief, not from the kind of wound Savannah probably imagined she'd left in me. I was awake because I was thinking, running numbers as I'd always done, calculating from every angle, making sure there were no gaps in what I was building. Around 2 in the morning, I got up, made chamomile tea, and stood for a while in Gerald's old study. I hadn't changed it much. His engineering books were still on the shelf. His reading chair still faced the window. I'd moved some of his things into our bedroom closet last spring. Not to forget, just to be able to breathe in the room without it feeling like a museum. That was where the lockbox was, under the closet floorboard, behind 2 boxes of his old work boots. He'd shown me the hiding spot years ago, laughing, "If anything ever happens to me, Dot, do not forget about the vault." I hadn't forgotten. I just hadn't been able to open it since the funeral. That night I did. The cedar smell hit me before I even got the lid all the way up. It smelled exactly like him, and I had to stop for a moment and just breathe through it. Then I got to work. Birth certificates, life insurance papers, already processed. Our marriage license, 38 years old, the paper soft at the folds. The original deed to the house, marked paid in full in Gerald's square handwriting at the top. The will we'd had drawn up in 2019, reviewed and updated after his diagnosis. And behind all of it, folded neatly and tucked against the back of the box, a plain white envelope, unsealed, no name on the front, just 4 words in Gerald's handwriting, "Only if necessary." My hands knew before my brain did. I could feel what this was before I opened it, the weight of it, the intention. Inside was a single typed page. The heading read, "Amended Intent Property Clause. In the event that our daughter Savannah acts without moral integrity toward her mother or toward the legacy of this family, the property at 814 Aldermore Lane shall be transferred in trust to our grandson Noah Hargrove Whitfield under the sole trustee supervision of Dorothy Ann Hargrove, to be held until Noah reaches the age of 25. The signature line at the bottom was blank. He had typed it. He had kept it. He had placed it exactly where he knew I would find it if I ever needed it. He had never gotten to sign it. The last 8 weeks had taken everything, the morphine making his hands uncertain, the days blurring into each other. But he had tried. He had seen what I was only beginning to document. He had been afraid of the same thing I was afraid of. I sat on the closet floor for a long time with that page in my hands. Then I called Pastor Ruth Beaumont in the morning. Ruth was a woman who had spent 40 years watching people carry things they shouldn't have to carry alone. She ran her congregation with the same particular combination of warmth and precision that I'd always respected. She didn't deal in false comfort, and she didn't waste your time getting to what mattered. When she pulled me aside after Sunday service, out in the hallway near Fellowship Room B, she looked at me the way she always looked at the people she was truly seeing. "You've been carrying something heavy," she said. "I can see it in the way you're standing." I opened my bag. I handed her the envelope. She read it twice, slowly, her reading glasses in one hand, the page held steady in the other. She didn't react outwardly. Ruth never did, in the theatrical sense. She read the way she prayed, deliberately, without performance. Then she folded the page back into the envelope, held it out to me, and said, "Don't let them confuse your silence with surrender." Something loosened in my chest. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding it. That afternoon she sent me a name. No website, no billboard, just an address and a phone number written on a note card in her neat hand. Mr. Owen Aldridge, Estate Law, Suite 3C. He handles things quietly. I called the next morning. He answered on the first ring. His office was small, orderly, and smelled like good coffee and old paper. My favorite combination. He was in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of stillness that only comes from years of watching other people's crises without joining them. He listened to everything I brought without interrupting. The envelope from Gerald, the full binder, the printed screenshots, the email forwarded by mistake, the voicemail transcript, the Goodwill photographs, the bracelet story, the florist receipt I hadn't told him about yet. He didn't blink at Savannah's Instagram post, the one where she'd written, "Can we normalize not inviting toxic parents to your wedding?" I said what I said. 847 likes. He read everything twice. Then he looked up. "With a notarized affidavit and sufficient documentation," he said, "this amendment can hold. Gerald's intent is clear, even without the signature. Intent is legally significant when it's paired with evidence of the conduct that triggered it." He paused. "Keep collecting. Focus on anything financial, anything that shows an attempt to control or access your assets, and anything digital. People tend to forget how permanent the internet is." I nodded. "I already have more. I just haven't shown you all of it yet." He almost smiled. I had a feeling. That night I went home and opened the notebook I'd bought that morning. Clean pages, dark green cover. I sat at the kitchen table in the quiet house with a cup of tea gone cold beside me and a moth circling the porch light outside. I turned to the first page, and I wrote, "This isn't revenge. This is reclamation." I closed the notebook, set it beside the strawberry-shaped USB drive my grandson Noah had given me 3 years ago. "It's cute, Grandma, like you." And I went to bed. For the first time in a very long time, I slept like a woman with a plan. There is a particular kind of power in being the person no one is watching. For 2 years, Savannah had looked right through me, past me, around me, over me. The way you look past furniture you've already decided to replace. She saw a woman in her late 60s who cried at hymns and kept too many photographs and didn't understand how to use cloud storage. She saw someone whose best days were behind her, whose opinions were quaint, whose presence was, at best, a mild inconvenience to be managed until it resolved itself naturally. She never once considered that the woman she was managing had spent 24 years finding the decimal points that senators tried to hide. That was her first mistake. It would not be her last. Agent Tara Hollis arrived on a Tuesday morning in a navy blazer with a leather notebook and the kind of quiet professionalism I immediately respected. She'd been recommended by a colleague of Mr. Aldridge, someone who understood discretion, who didn't ask unnecessary questions, who had sold historic properties for 30 years without once making the process feel like a performance. She walked through the house slowly, making notes, running her hand along the built-in bookshelves Gerald had installed in the study, pausing in the kitchen to look at the original tile work above the stove. She didn't rush. She didn't pull out a tablet full of comparable listings or start talking about what buyers wanted to see. She just looked, carefully and with genuine attention, the way people look at things they understand have value beyond the obvious. When she reached the back porch, she stopped and looked out at the garden. "Solid bones," she said quietly. "And that light in the south rooms, you don't find that in new construction." I laughed. It came out before I could stop it. The kind of laugh that surprises you. The kind that happens when something is true and you weren't expecting to feel it. It was the first time I had laughed in weeks, maybe longer. She didn't ask about the framed engagement photos turned face down on the hallway shelf. She didn't ask why Gerald's slippers were still under the bed in the master bedroom. She was a professional. She saw what she needed to see, and she respected everything else. By the time she left, I had 3 voicemails from Savannah. I hadn't even put the sign up yet. Tara had simply walked the house and taken preliminary photographs. Nothing visible from the street. But Noah had been over for dinner the night before and had apparently mentioned something to his mother about a lady measuring the dining room. The first voicemail came at 4:17 p.m. "Hey, Mom, so I just got this weird Zillow alert about the house. Must be some kind of algorithm glitch. Let me know if that's a mistake. Love you." The voice was light, unbothered. The voice of someone who was bothered and working to sound unbothered. The second came at 6:45. "Hi again. Noah mentioned something about a woman taking photos. I just want to make sure everything's okay. You know you can always call me, right? Love you." The third came at 9 p.m. The lightness was mostly gone. I don't know what you're doing, but if this is some kind of dramatic statement, it's not cute. Call me. Not cute. That phrase again. I did not call her back. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and went to finish the dish I was drying. Silence, I had learned, was a tool. Most people couldn't tolerate it for long. They filled it with more words, and more words meant more material. I was content to let Savannah fill the silence however she chose. 2 days later, Tara brought a photographer. He was polite and quiet, mid-30s, careful with the angles, conscious of the light. He asked me to step out of the frame when he shot the living room. I stood in the doorway and watched him work. "This room gets beautiful light," he said. "It held a lot of birthdays," I told him. He smiled like he understood exactly what I meant. That evening, the formal listing went live, and that same evening, my phone rang. Not a voicemail this time. A text message. Just 3 words, no punctuation, no greeting. "Are you serious?" No question mark. That detail told me everything. Savannah typed question marks when she was performing Curiosity. When she was genuinely shaken, she forgot the punctuation entirely. I set the phone face down and went to sit with Noah, who was building a Lego spacecraft on the living room floor. "Grandma," he said, not looking up from the instruction manual, "when we move to the new house, can I bring the fort blanket?" I looked at him. This small, serious, kind 9-year-old boy who still held my hand crossing the street, who still asked me to tell him stories about Gerald, who still thought baking banana bread on Sunday afternoons was a reasonable way to spend a weekend. The one person in the wreckage of this family whose love required absolutely nothing from me in return. "We'll build a bigger fort," I said, "one nobody can tear down." He looked up at me then, with Gerald's eyes, and nodded like that was the most sensible thing he'd heard all week. The formal offer came 4 days later. A retired couple from Savannah, Georgia, the coincidence of the city name did not escape me, relocating to be closer to grandchildren. The wife had included a handwritten letter with the offer. She said she used to bake from scratch and hoped the oven still worked. It did. I had cleaned it the night before she came to view, the way I always cleaned it. Properly. Every rack, every corner. "We walked in," she wrote, "and felt like it had a soul. Full cash. No contingencies. Closing in 30 days. I called Mr. Aldridge at 8:15 that evening. "Sign it," he said, before I'd finished describing the offer. So I did. I woke at 5:11 the morning after I signed. Not from a dream. From clarity. The particular kind that arrives when you've been carrying a weight so long that the moment it becomes a plan instead of a problem, your body wakes up to tell you it noticed. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled the blue binder from the sewing room cabinet. Then I sat down at the kitchen table under the good light and began building what I privately thought of as the prosecutor's file. Not because I was an angry woman, because I was a precise one. Everything in that binder had a date, a context, and a consequence. I organized it chronologically first, then by category: financial, behavioral, digital, documented statements. The way I used to organize budget audits. The way that, when it was done, left no room for interpretation. Let me tell you what was in it. Savannah's Instagram was public. She had 17,000 followers and believed firmly in her own narrative. I had been screenshotting it for 14 months. The most relevant post, a reel she'd filmed at what appeared to be a rooftop bar, champagne in hand, speaking directly to the camera with the practiced casualness of someone who had rehearsed the casualness. "Can we normalize not inviting toxic parents to your wedding?" I said what I said. 2 champagne glass emojis. 847 likes. 42 comments, most of them supportive, several of them asking for the tea. She was happy to provide it in the replies. I had printed every page. Then there was the email. This one had come to me by accident. Savannah had been using my Wi-Fi during a visit and had apparently auto-synced to my Apple account briefly without realizing it. I'd received a forwarded thread from her work account to her personal one, and from there to her maid of honor, Kelsey. The thread's subject line was, "Should we just not tell her?" The relevant portion, copied exactly as written, "Honestly, I'm fine if she doesn't show. I know she'll be weird about it and make everything about Dad and cry, and honestly, her whole vibe is just depressing. She doesn't get that this is my moment." Her whole vibe. After 68 years of living, after raising her, after the 38 years of marriage she had watched and apparently absorbed nothing from, I had been reduced to a vibe she found inconvenient. I had printed that thread and placed it in a separate sleeve, but the voicemail was the one that changed things. Savannah had meant to call Kelsey. My contact and Kelsey's contact were apparently close together in her phone. I'd noticed before that she had me listed under Mom with what I understood was a flat-faced emoji, though I chose not to dwell on that particular detail. She hit the wrong one. My voicemail picked up, and she spoke for 43 seconds before she realized her mistake and ended the call. I had the automatic transcript. I had the audio file. I had the metadata showing the timestamp and originating number. She said, "I know she's technically paying for part of it, but honestly it's hush money. She should be grateful we're even pretending to include her. And if she pulls that bracelet stunt again, I swear to God, Kels, I will lose it." Hush money. I turned that phrase over in my mind for a long time. The small gestures I had made, the quiet contributions to the wedding fund, the offer of the bracelet, the check I'd sent for the venue deposit. She hadn't experienced any of it as love. She had experienced it as payment. Currency offered by someone who understood they had no other leverage. She thought my kindness was a transaction. She thought I was buying my place at the table. And the bracelet, my grandmother's bracelet, worn at 4 weddings across 4 generations, offered in a velvet box that she hadn't even opened. She called it a stunt. I sat for a long time with the phone in my hand. Then I heard the sound I can only describe as a lock disengaging. Not anger. I want to be precise about that, because anger is hot and blurry, and I was neither. This was cold and clear and mechanical, like finding the hidden decimal, like the moment in a budget review when the numbers stop lying. I forwarded everything to Mr. Aldridge, the Instagram screenshots, the forwarded email, the voicemail audio file, and its metadata. He replied 2 hours and 17 minutes later. "We are well within grounds for full disinheritance. I need one more element. Documented intent to control or access your financial assets without authorization. If you have anything along those lines, send it immediately." I typed back, "I have it. I just haven't shown you yet." In the kitchen drawer under the dish towels, there was a florist receipt I had kept for 6 weeks. $389. White peonies and ranunculus. Charged to my credit card. One of the many "oops, I'll Venmo you" charges that had never been repaid. The delivery note was still attached to it, in the handwriting of someone who believed she was being clever. "Thank you for not coming. Enjoy the silence. It suits you." She had sent me flowers for staying away from her wedding. She had charged them to my account and written me a note to tell me she was glad I was gone. I smoothed the receipt on the kitchen table, looked at it for a moment. Then I picked up the phone and called Tara Hollis to confirm the closing timeline. "You want silence, Savannah?" I thought. "Let's talk about silence." Mr. Aldridge did not make early calls unless something was on fire. His number came up at a 7:42 on a Thursday morning. I was still in my robe, coffee in hand, watching a cardinal on the back fence. One of Gerald's cardinals, the ones that came back every spring to the feeder he'd hung in 2009. I answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Hargrove." His voice had that particular flatness that I recognized as controlled urgency. "Have you recently applied for a mortgage?" I set my coffee down. "No," I said. "Then we have a significant problem. A loan application had been submitted under my name, Dorothy Ann Hargrove, my social security number, my date of birth, my address. The signature on the scanned form was close enough that someone had clearly spent time on it, but the loops in the D were wrong, and the H in Hargrove had a slant that wasn't mine. An underwriter at the lending institution had flagged an inconsistency between the application's claimed banking history and my actual account activity. The flag had triggered a review. The review had found the IP address on the digital submission. The device was registered to Savannah Hargrove Whitfield. The loan amount was $40,000, filed against the equity of 814 Aldermore Lane. Filed, as Mr. Aldridge said with characteristic precision, as if she were already the owner. I stood at the kitchen window and looked at Gerald's garden. The dahlias were starting to bud along the back fence. The cardinal was still on the feeder. "This crosses into criminal territory," Mr. Aldridge said. He wasn't being dramatic. He didn't do drama. He was simply itemizing. Financial fraud, elder financial abuse, identity theft. We are no longer speaking only about disinheritance. We are speaking about liability. He asked if I wanted to file a formal fraud report. I didn't answer immediately. I thought about Noah sleeping in the guest room last weekend, curled on top of the covers in his soccer cleats because he'd fallen asleep before I could get him to take them off. I thought about Gerald's handwriting on that envelope, only if necessary. "File it," I said. "All of it. Make it official. No more gaps." "Understood." After I hung up, I went to find the wedding dress. It hadn't taken long. Savannah had posted the photos publicly, a full carousel on Instagram, professionally lit in what appeared to be a high-end boutique dressing room, the kind with good mirrors and champagne on a silver tray. "When you find the dress, you know #blessed, #paid in full. Custom Vera Wang, ivory silk, cathedral veil." I looked up the retail price, $8,200. Then I looked up the charge on my credit card from 6 weeks prior, one of the several "oops, meant to use mine" charges. Savannah had run through my account during wedding planning and promised to repay. The charge was from the boutique, $8,200. Her name was on the order. My card was on the payment. I sat with that for a long time. She had not simply disrespected me. She had not simply forged my name to borrow money against a house she thought was already hers. She had used my name, my credit, my financial identity to buy her wedding gown, the dress she wore in photographs captioned "Blessed and paid in full." Paid in full? With what exactly, Savannah? Something settled in me then. Not rage. I want to keep being clear about that because what I felt was not rage, and it is important that you understand the difference. Rage is reactive. What I felt was conclusive. The way a proof feels when the last variable resolves. The way a case file feels when the last piece of evidence slides into place and the whole picture becomes undeniable. I sent Mr. Aldridge the credit card statement, the boutique charge, the Instagram posts, and the loan application summary he'd already sent me, now annotated in my own handwriting. His reply came within the hour. "This is everything we need and more. As of today, Savannah Hargrove Whitfield will be formally and irrevocably removed from all inheritance pathways. The trust transfer to Noah will proceed upon closing. You retain full trustee control. She has no remaining legal claim to any portion of the estate." Irrevocably. I printed that email. I taped it inside the back cover of my green notebook, and underneath it, I wrote 7 words. She bought a dress. I bought her silence. The next morning, I sent Savannah a voice message, 32 seconds, calm as a balance sheet. "Savannah, honey, there's been a small change with the estate. Nothing urgent. I was hoping we could meet after the wedding, maybe that Sunday brunch you mentioned. I'd really like to talk." She replied in 9 minutes, a single red heart emoji. She was confident, radiant with confidence, the way people are when they believe they have already won. She thought I had had my rebellion, the house listing, the dramatic gestures, and had come back around to softness. She thought I missed her enough to reach out. She thought the message was an olive branch. She didn't know it was a key turning in a lock. There is a particular art to pretending, not lying. I want to be precise about that distinction. I did not lie to Savannah during those 2 weeks. I simply allowed her to believe whatever she needed to believe in order to walk through the door I was holding open. People deceive themselves so efficiently, so completely, that half the time you don't need to do anything at all except be quiet and let them. I attended choir practice. I had Ruth over for dinner on a Wednesday. I watered Gerald's dahlias and answered Noah's texts about a school science project involving the migratory patterns of monarch butterflies. I moved through my days with the particular calm of someone who has done everything they need to do and is simply waiting for the sequence to complete. Savannah, meanwhile, was incandescent. She posted her bachelorette weekend. Palm trees, matching silk robes, a mimosa bar shaped like a swan. She posted a photo from her final dress fitting, veil spread wide behind her, face tilted up, light catching everything perfectly. She tagged Brett. She tagged Kelsey. She tagged Amanda, her other bridesmaid. She did not tag me, but she did, in one story that disappeared after 24 hours, post a close-up of the dress with the caption, "No negative energy allowed near this gown." I screenshot it. I added it to the file. She texted me twice during those 2 weeks. Once a photo of the wedding venue. "Can you believe this is happening?" Once more carefully. "Really glad we're in a better place, Mom. See you at brunch Sunday." I replied to both with warmth. Brief, genuine-sounding warmth, the kind I had practiced for years in federal meetings when I needed a senator to trust me long enough to show me where they'd buried the numbers. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Me too, honey. Sunday it is. What was actually happening during those 2 weeks? The sale of 814 Aldermore Lane closed on a Thursday. The couple from Georgia sent me a card. A real card, handwritten, with a drawing Noah's age grandchild had made of the house, the dahlias along the fence rendered in crayon. I put it on the refrigerator next to Noah's school picture. The trust documents were finalized and notarized. Noah Hargrove Whitfield was named sole beneficiary. Dorothy Ann Hargrove was named sole trustee with full control until Noah's 25th birthday. Every legal pathway that had previously included Savannah's name was formally closed. The fraud report, filed 2 weeks prior, had moved through the system. Savannah's credit had been flagged. She didn't know this yet. And Kelsey, who had laughed in that restaurant corner at the engagement party while Savannah told me I was too toxic for a wedding invitation. Kelsey had called me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mrs. Hargrove, I need you to know I'm not part of this anymore. I haven't been for a while." She paused. "I have something you should probably have." She sent me an audio file, a conversation between Savannah and Amanda, recorded on Kelsey's phone without their knowledge. "I'm sorry, I know that's not great, but I thought someone should have it." Discussing how to manage the narrative if Dorothy caused a scene at the brunch, if she brought papers, if she said anything about the house in front of Brett's family. "Just shut her down fast," Savannah's voice said on the recording. "She's old and she's emotional and nobody's going to take her side over mine. Just stay close." I listened to it twice. Then I saved it to the Strawberry USB and forwarded the file to Mr. Aldridge with one line. "In case it becomes relevant." He replied, "It already is." Saturday night I laid out what I was going to wear to the brunch. A gray silk blouse Gerald had always liked on me. My good pearls. The necklace he'd given me on our 20th anniversary. Simple gold chain, small sapphire pendant. The one Savannah had once at a Christmas dinner described as a clearance bin regret. I would be wearing it Sunday morning. I prepared the envelope that night. Took my time with it. Printed every document cleanly, in order. The closing confirmation for 814 Aldermore Lane, the trust documents with Noah's name on the first page, and the official fraud filing with Savannah's IP address, clearly visible in the summary. I placed them in a plain manila envelope. No note, no name written on the outside. The documents were the message. They didn't need a cover letter. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter and went to bed at 9:30. The last thing I wrote in my green notebook that night. She thinks tomorrow is a reconciliation breakfast. She's walking into a reading of the verdict. The difference between those two things is everything Gerald and I spent 38 years building. I'm ready.